Good afternoon. Today is October the 24th, year 2024. Our meeting is now open for the AIB session for today. Let me give a couple of open remarks. First of all, let me thank our and staff for the multitude of issues and challenges that we've dealt with and worked with the local LEAs, the State Board of Education, and so many others. Oftentimes, we don't thank them enough for all the hard work, the meetings, and the number of correspondence that they go through on a daily basis. So thank the staff again and the staff of all of our partners for the tremendous amount of work that you've accomplished thus far. We have a number of important items on the agenda today. We will be taking a number of votes on a couple of items that I think may be ready for approval. But before we do that, we need to have an adoption of our last meeting summary. I hope that everyone has had an opportunity to look at the summary. And if so, I can entertain a motion now for approval.
I would move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we approve the adoption of the last meeting summary. Are there any questions, comments? Ready for the question? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the last meeting summary minutes have been adopted. Are there any revisions to the agenda for today? Changes or initial comments of what is on the agenda for today? Okay. At this point in time, we're about ready to go to our open comments. I think we have 3, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. 3 people have signed up for public comment.
Okay.
The first is Daniela Helton from Montgomery County Public Schools.
Okay. Is Ms. Helton here?
She is.
Good afternoon, Chair Leggett, Vice Chair Kerwin, and members of the Accountability and Implementation Board. My name is Holly Kleiderline. I'm an elementary school counselor in Anne Arundel County, the chair of the Advocacy and Legislative Concerns Committee for the Maryland School Counselor Association, better known as MASCA, and I've been a national board certified teacher in school counseling since 2006. I appreciate the long list of items this group needs to address in Pillar 2 to recruit and retain a high quality and diverse workforce. I'd like to bring your attention to page 87 of the Blueprint Comprehensive Implementation Plan. It states that the AIB and MSDE, quote, shall develop guidance for the LEAs regarding NBC certification with regard to school counselors and the requirements to be eligible for the NBC salary increases, end quote. It is still on the to-do list, and I want to impress upon you the impact on our students. School counselor candidates engage in the same rigorous process as our fellow NBCTs to identify critical student needs and provide evidence that we implement meaningful interventions to address them. These areas include academic achievement gaps, college and career readiness, regular attendance, and social emotional support, the same areas of need identified in the blueprint. Without the salary enhancement, there have been 0 new school counselor national board candidates in my county. Students are missing out on school counselors engaged in the best professional development they can experience. Without the salary enhancement, school counselors are deciding to retire as they have less incentive to remain. Without the salary enhancement, there is not an additional incentive for a school counselor to choose a community school or for a school counselor at a community school to pursue certification. The NBCT salary enhancement is meant to recruit and retain the best educators. However, even though we are the only mental health professionals eligible to become NBCTs, we are being excluded. I have been advocating for support on this issue through MASCA for several years, and I ask that you complete the task meant to fix our exclusion from the salary ladder. Additionally, I call on AIB and the Maryland State Board of Education to follow up on the school counselor target metric that was held for further consideration during the June 25th joint MSBE and AIB meeting on the alignment of education plan metrics and proposed targets discussion. There's a workforce shortage and not enough school counselors to meet the continued increasing needs of students today. The Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education's 2019 report adopted the nationally recommended ratio of 250 students per school counselor. However, per 2023-24 MSDE data, many of our counties are significantly above the recommended ratio. The baseline data indicated an average student to counselor ratio of 307:1, but I urge you to collect correct data and disaggregate it by level, as some schools have a 1,000:1 student to counselor ratio. State data shows that a focus must be placed on these ratios. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Could I ask a question on the ratio, those numbers again? Explain it again. You gave two different numbers there, the 1,001. How do you get that?
So there are often at the elementary level, you'll have one school counselor in an elementary school. So no matter how many students there are in that school, there might be a single school counselor. So there are some schools that have over 1,000 students and they have one school counselor.
I got you. Thank you. Our next speaker, who is it? Holly
Can I
Callerini?
just clarify? So, Holly, you just spoke. Did you both kind of combine your testimony? No. Okay, so Holly went first, and now we're Daniela. Okay. Thank you.
Kelton?
Okay, yes, thank you. I'll go ahead and begin. Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Daniela Helton, and I am a NBCT counselor at Little Bennett Elementary School in Montgomery County. I am also the elected union representative for all elementary school counselors in Montgomery County. I'm here today to call on the board and MSDE to follow up on Task 2, Objective 4, Pillar 2, Subtask 242B, found on page 87 of the blueprint for Maryland's future comprehensive implementation plan, which calls for AIB and MSDE to develop guidance for the LEAs regarding NBC certification for school counselors, media specialists, and other positions, and the requirements to be eligible for the NBC salary increases. I have been an elementary school counselor in Montgomery County for 20 years. I achieved NBCT status in 2009 because I wanted to gain this advanced certification in order to impact change. School counselors have a wide range of responsibilities because we are taught to address the specific needs of our students and to create programs to overcome barriers to ensure student success. For example, one of the targeted groups I meet with each day includes the 8 students at my school with the highest level of absences. The interventions I use in this group have helped to ensure these students not only come to school, but arrive on time and stay the whole day. This is one small example of how I address the needs of my students to achieve academic success, because without my interventions, they would not be present and available for learning. Currently, my LEA is not recognizing the only 15 NBCT school counselors out of approximately 600 school counselors in Montgomery County. Instead, they continue to heavily promote the NBCT process for other educators. And since 2022, MCPS has produced 169 new blueprint eligible NBCTs. The NBCT process is important for school counselors because it not only enhances school counselor knowledge and professionalism, but it increases retention of school counselors. Montgomery County opened the current school year with 25 school counselor openings, and as of last month, we still have 17 openings. School counselors are leaving the profession, and after a recent survey that I shared with the AIB during my last testimony, school counselors have no interest in pursuing NBCT certification if the blueprint ignores them. The blueprint for Maryland's future aims to prioritize equity, but there has been no equity for school counselors, and as a result, mental health has not become a priority. Furthermore, many inconsistencies have resulted. Currently, there is no consistency regarding the monetary support among many LEAs throughout Maryland for school counselors. There have also been many inconsistencies as related to the financial support for NBCT certification. For example, when I achieved in 2009 and 10 years later, when I renewed my certification, I received a scholarship funding for this process. All of a sudden, during the last 2 years, school counselors have been excluded from this funding. However, this school year, school counselors were notified that they will now be included in the scholarship funding for NBCT certification, but they will continue to be left out of the blueprint eligibility salary enhancement. AIB, the Maryland school counselors need you to ensure equity and place mental health as a priority. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I ask that the AIB and MSDE develop guidance for LEAs regarding NBC certification, regarding school counselors and other positions, and the requirements to be eligible for the NBC salary increases. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today on this issue. We heard you, and we heard you loud and clear. We have not forgotten the earlier interest that you've expressed about this, and hopefully we'll get back a response to you fairly quickly. We will take this matter with the state board, and hopefully we can come up with some resolution. I can't attest to what that might be. We need to do further research regarding the numbers that we're talking about and how inconsistent this is around the state. But you made your point loud and clear. We heard you, and hopefully we can come up with a fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think one other.
Yes. Kenzie Funk from Strong Schools, Maryland.
Hi, my name is Kenzie Funk, and I'm the policy advocate with Strong Schools Maryland. Over the past couple of months, we have been reviewing phase 2 of the blueprint implementation plans to create snapshots of each of the LEA's plan in order to highlight equitable impacts of blueprint implementation in an accessible format and promote stakeholder engagement by linking all relevant data sheets and information. I've come here today to speak to some of our key takeaways and requests and suggestions from creating these implementation plan snapshots. We know effective communication and community engagement is imperative to the success of the blueprint, as the blueprint promises truly transformative reform. As such, LEAs have developed many innovative ways to reach communities and gather feedback. LEAs in schools have implemented town halls open to community members, tailored pillar teams comprised of diverse stakeholder groups, surveys sent out to communities, and informational sessions in the evenings and weekends. Significant progress has been made in terms of commitment to community engagement at the local level. However, there are still barriers to communication with student groups and their families, such as multi-language students and students with specific transportation needs or students with disabilities, indicating that changes in local strategies must be made in order to ensure that these perspectives are heard. These challenges illuminate specific opportunities for the AIB to provide strategic guidance. And if the AIB cannot provide this guidance, you are in the unique position in connecting with partners that have such expertise. In creating our snapshots, we also noted the ways in which LEAs are meeting the minimum funding to school requirement of the blueprint. Some of these strategies include multi-year budgeting projections, new budget tracking systems that track expenses at the school level, and forums in which the community can provide budget feedback. However, much like engagement, counties have encountered many challenges regarding meeting their minimum funding requirements, including the development or implementation of these new budgetary tracking systems, or a lack of adequate funding to support overall student needs in general. The AIB and MSDE have the unique perspective of statewide oversight, and it's crucial to leverage this as we progress through blueprint implementation. It's clear that the AIB, LEAs, and schools have taken significant steps to provide outreach to communities. However, strategic guidance would be useful in improving the impact of this outreach. And if the AIB lacks this capacity, we urge collaboration with external partners. Furthermore, progress is absolutely evident in areas such as increasing access to post-CCR pathways and more resources for all students. However, now the focus must also be on measuring the impact of these investments. It needs to be clear that these investments are making changes within the system. We urge the board to collaborate with MSDE on developing a robust financial management system and student data system, and to take an active role in bringing the community into these conversations in order to best track how we invest in our students. Thank you so much for your time and consideration today. Please reach out with any questions or comments, and Strong Schools Maryland is always ready to collaborate.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Thank you. All right, there any additional comments for today, Ms. Executive Director?
No, that is all of the public comment.
All right. I think we'll now
Thank you
go
all.
agenda item 3. Thank you again for your comments. And I'll turn it over to the Executive Director, Ms. Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Emma, if I can ask you to share your screen, and the next item on the agenda is the status of the LEA Blueprint implementation plans, and where we are in the approval process. And we do have a recommendation for approval of our first 2 LEAs that have met all of the requirements this year for their plans. So we will get to that. But what I wanted to start with is, before we sort of get into sort of very more, have things met, have LEAs met the requirements, we really just wanted to remind everyone about, why we asked LEAs to create blueprint implementation plans and what we're trying to accomplish. And so you've seen this before. We're going to keep bringing it back. This is what we call the blueprint theory of action. And this is sort of just a high-level graphic to show how the 5 pillars work together to support achieving the blueprint's ultimate goal, which is that all of our students leave high school ready for success in whatever path they choose and in life. And as part of that, there are very specific policy initiatives and activities under each pillar that are intended to support achieving that goal. And many of those activities interact across pillars. And so you can see that we have lines that are connecting pillars 1 around early childhood education, pillar 2. We just talked about high quality and diverse educators in our schools and leaders. Pillar 3 around college and career readiness. Pillar 4, making sure that students have those resources that they need to be successful. And then pillar 5, which is an effective governance and accountability system to help coordinate all of the work and it lead to success. And so I know we all know that the plans are not just to write a plan. It's really to think about and reflect on how things are going to be, what is already happening and what needs to be done differently in order to achieve the blueprint's goals. And so with that sort of grounding, we can move on to the specifics. So this year, LEAs submitted their first implementation plans in 2023. And what I don't want to get us all confused with phases, but a second plan here in 2024, which is covering, between the 2 plans, it covers the 5-year period from fiscal 23 through fiscal 27. So ultimately, the 2 plans combined reflect a 5-year plan for how each LEA is going to implement the blueprint. And so part 1 and 2 of the 24 submission of that plan, we broke that into 2 pieces. And the first part was submitted in March, the second part was submitted in May. And we've been going through that review process. The second component of the plans is the career ladder. And so this is the initial career ladder that each LEA was required to submit by statute July 1st. And that includes levels 1 to 3, as well as the first maintenance of certification for national board teachers. A third component, so many more elements to the plan and the plan approval process this year than there was last year in 2023. So the another element, which is a requirement of the statute, is that the LEAs provided a 10% salary increase over the past 5 years. A fourth element of the plan approval is the pre-K through 12 literacy plans that the LEAs were required to submit in June of 2024. And then finally, revised memorandum of understandings related to the career counseling program, if required, for each LEA and their partner workforce board and community college. So all of those components make up the 2024 plan approval. And that plan approval, as you know, is with plan approval comes the release of the blueprint funds that are automatically withheld under the statute until the AIB approves the plan. And as a reminder, that's 25% of the new blueprint funds, so the year-over-year increase in blueprint funds. And so it's a very specific process that that we're going through to be able to, for staff to recommend approval to the board and for you to consider approval of each LEA's plan. Next slide. Or sorry, any questions? Just if you have any questions, as always, just raise your hand and we will make sure I'm monitoring that. Okay. So we're just going to walk through these different components that I just summarized. And so the first item is the part 1 and part 2 blueprint plan reviews. And for that, Emma Pellerin, our implementation plan director, is going to take over here.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm excited to share a little bit more about the plan approval process and note that all 24 part 1 and part 2 submissions now meet the criteria for success. So just as a quick summary of our progress since the September 4th meeting, there were 3 remaining LEAs that had part 2 submissions that still had some revisions that needed to be done to meet the criteria for success. Following the September 4th meeting, those submissions came through and AIB and MSDE staff reviewed those updated responses and found that they now meet the criteria for success. And as part of that process, similar to what we saw with September 4th meeting and in the August 1st meeting, we identified both areas of strength and areas for opportunity and growth that we wanted to note as part of those submissions for moving forward. And, you know, again, speaking to the idea of ensuring that these best practices are disseminated or promising practices are disseminated, we want to elevate those as part of these conversations and then also continue to monitor and follow up on where there's still opportunities for growth throughout the implementation period. So we do have those feedback forms linked in the meeting agenda if you'd like to see the specific feedback, but we have highlighted some of the biggest areas. These are certainly not comprehensive. We haven't highlighted every single strength in these in this slide, and we haven't highlighted every single area for growth, but those are available in the 3 separate feedback documents if you'd like to review them. So I'll just go ahead and speak to the ones that we have highlighted here and go into a couple of examples, particularly with regards to the promising practices that reviewers highlighted as part of the plan review process. Similar to the plans that we saw and discussed in previous meetings, there's promising practices with regards to increasing access to pre-K programming. And those were certainly evident in Calvert's plans with some of their practices related to increasing pre-K access. Reviewers noted a practice of sharing a common curriculum between private and public pre-K providers whenever possible, as something that could, be disseminated to other LEAs as well. In addition, Queen Anne's County has been focused on outreach related to its online enrollment system to ensure that families are aware of the opportunity to enroll in pre-K. And we saw that in other LEAs as well, but that was something specific to Queen Anne's plan that was noted. In addition, there's a focus on ensuring educators are meeting appropriate staffing and credentialing requirements. In Calvert County, they are working on a new apprenticeship pathway for pre-K providers to help ensure that they meet the high quality staffing requirements that are part of the blueprint. And Queen Anne's County reviewers also noted that Queen Anne's has seen progress in credentialing for pre-K teachers. That was also highlighted as part of the plan review. In terms of supports for multilingual learners, this was elevated in both Calvert County and Somerset County's implementation plans. In Calvert County, the supervisor of equity is providing bias training to school-based staff that's incorporated with multi-tiered systems of support and restorative practices related to instruction for multilingual learners. In addition, in Somerset County, the county is providing professional development on the assets of multilingualism. And this is very much aligned with recommendations from the work group on multilingual learners and their report and list of recommendations that they provided in their final report. So we wanted to elevate that as well. In terms of multi-tiered systems of support, we also saw a focus on increasing and strengthening tier 1, 2, and 3 instruction in Queen Anne's County. There was certainly evidence of efforts to do so in their implementation plan. And in Somerset County, we see that there are, strong efforts to build a continuous improvement process related to college and career readiness that is grounded in an aligned K-12 instructional system. And the county is focusing on ensuring that they have this continuous improvement process in place. And so, we highlighted this small list of areas of strength and opportunity moving forward for these LEAs. Again, this is not comprehensive. It's not comprehensive across all 24. We also found areas for growth and improvement. Certainly resonates with what Kenzie was sharing a little bit earlier today with regards to the public comment. But we're focusing on strengthening progress monitoring and data collection activities and analysis efforts. That is an area for growth and opportunity, not just in Somerset, Queen Anne, and Calvert, but across many LEAs. So that's an area for focus moving forward. In addition, expanding strategies to support teachers in achieving national board certification. Also, this doesn't speak directly to this in this slide, but of course we know that that's a focus for school leadership as well. Improving collaborations with institutions of higher education and ensuring that we're taking all considerations into account with regards to these partnerships and how they can help be leveraged to ensure that teachers are getting the supports they need to meet credentialing requirements as well as staffing requirements. Diversifying community and partner feedback and intentionally incorporating it into the district's implementation plan and their implementation strategies. Again, I think that this very much resonates with what Kenzie was saying earlier today, but that is an area of focus for across the board, as well as in Somerset, Queen Anne, and Calvert counties. And then diversifying school leadership to reflect the diversity of the district student population. That is something we've spoken about in previous meetings as well. And this was a specific point in these implementation plans that was called out by reviewers. But again, these are not just these are some of the points that were raised, not all of them. And these are just specific to these 3 counties. There's other areas for growth, other areas of strength that we've highlighted in previous meetings, and they're all available in the feedback documents. So if anybody has any questions about this feedback, though, happy to take any questions at this time.
Emma?
Yes.
Yeah. A question I have is, we've noted areas for growth and improvement. And do we have built into the process a way of checking when they submit their next plans, they have addressed these issues? I don't want them to, I don't want these areas for growth and improvement just to be lost, be a one-time comment. So how do we have a follow-up on the areas for growth and improvement?
Well, in terms of this round of implementation plans, I can share how that was accounted for, because we did have areas of growth and improvement in our last implementation plans. And then I'll talk about moving forward. For this set of implementation plans, there was actually a criterion in the criteria for success that the response needed to respond to or discuss how the county, how the LEA was responding to any relevant feedback from the previous submission in 2023 about areas for growth and improvement. Now, in some cases, the particular prompt or question did not have feedback that was relevant to that question. And in those cases, they just would get a not applicable. It wasn't counted against them. But if there was some direct feedback from their last implementation plan submission, from the 2023 submission, that was part of the criteria for success, and it was shared that that needed to be addressed as part of their updated implementation plan. And when it wasn't addressed, that was sent back and they were asked to respond to that feedback. So that was for this cycle. Do you have questions about that? And then I can share about next steps.
No, that's fine. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of the next implementation plan, of course, we know that the next big submission isn't due until fiscal year 27.
Right.
But how that, what that looks like several years out, you know, I think that this process actually worked relatively well. So perhaps we'll build in something similar when we're creating the criteria for success for that submission in a couple of years. But when we're thinking about the implementation plan for fiscal year 25, there are no written submissions. It's not going to be the same process as we had this time. So this will be much more built into this ongoing progress monitoring and accountability that the AIB will be maintaining, and we'll be, you know, sharing more details about what that process looks like moving forward. But it's going to be a collaborative effort between AIB and MSDE to ensure that these areas for growth are addressed and aren't, you know, simply put to the side. That's definitely not the purpose of these feedback documents. And there's the expectation that, of course, in the best interest of student outcomes and improving student outcomes, that these areas for growth and feedback are acted upon.
And I see Dr. Stapleton's hand up. So, but if I could just add that we are in discussions with MSDE to try to frame out what progress monitoring could look like over the next several years, and how to maybe, you know, we're asking LEAs to be innovative and think differently. We're trying to do the same thing around how can we provide more timely feedback and really engage in a process that is ongoing and not sort of once a year. And so we will be coming back to the boards with our recommendations on what that could look like very soon. Dr. Stapleton.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Emma and team, for these careful reviews and sort of compiling some of this information about strengths, opportunities, growth, and improvement. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but the solicitation for the evaluation, the required midterm evaluation plan, it would be wonderful, I think, and this is just an idea, is to share these sort of summary reviews or findings with that evaluation team, whoever it is. And because while you were talking, Emma, I was thinking about, how do we know that that's an area of strength? Like, what is it about that as being a strength, or what do we have that's going to pay off in the end? So it could be that some of these things that you've identified as strengths, we might want to look at them to see if they were really levers for improvement in those LEAs. But that's just an idea for that evaluation. I know you'll co-develop it with the team that's selected.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think we certainly will share all of these documents and, what was also created last year with the evaluators. And I appreciate also the comment on how are we measuring the impact. And I think the areas of strength and opportunity component of it too, it's opportunity that it seems like it's going to potentially yield positive results, or there's indications that it could yield positive results. In some cases, we know there's already a good practice, but there are certainly some that are being raised that, we want to see what that impact is. And that could be a great place for the evaluators to help us. So thank you for that suggestion. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next component, I believe, is question 23. And this is the last question in part 2 of the blueprint plans, and it relates to resource allocation. And this includes methods of allocation and reallocation of funds to meet blueprint priorities, multi-year budget projections over multiple years, and also by blueprint program or pillar, and strategies to meet the minimum school funding requirements. Alexandra Vernon, our finance director, is working closely on this review. And Alex, if you could review the results that we have.
Absolutely. Did you want me to review like the amount of responses that we had here on the slide, or did you want me to go into any details for the criteria?
No, I think you can just, if you could talk about which plans are ready for approval and what we're doing for those that are not.
Okay, sure. So we have 2 additional LEAs that now met the criteria for success, and that's Dorchester and Hartford. So that brings us up to 9 that have met the criteria for success for question 23 for all of the 3 components. And then the remaining 15 LEAs that need a little bit more further revision, we're working on, we've provided some feedback, and 3 of the LEAs have already provided their resubmissions for revisions. So we're reviewing them now.
And of those, for the 15 that required further revision, we've given them feedback. We very specifically identified what was missing. And you can see that for most of them, they were missing the multi-year budget plan, either in total, including by blueprint program and pillar, or a subset of that. 12 of them, and 12 are also missing, did not fully flesh out their strategies to meet the minimum school funding requirement. So those are sort of the 2 main areas for revision. And as part of our technical assistance grant program, resource allocation is one of our primary focus areas this year for phase 2 of the technical assistant grant. And as part of that, 18 LEAs are currently participating, and we're actually adding 2 additional LEAs that have requested assistance. And part of that work and the immediate work that they're strategic partners are working with them on is their revisions to question 23 so that they're able to meet the criteria for success and be approved. We do have, as with the LEA implementation plans, the specific feedback forms for Dorchester and Hartford are provided in the folder if anyone has any specific questions around Dorchester and Hartford or any of the others that have already been approved or not approved, recommended for approval. So 7 were recommended for approval at last month's meeting, and we have 2 additional this month. But we have had indications from essentially all of the remaining LEAs that they are working to provide those revisions as soon as they can.
The expectation is that we would approve them when? There will be
yeah, so the timeline, and we're going to get into this in a little more detail in a little while, but essentially we have provided the LEAs with a timeline of November 12th to submit any revisions to AIB to review, which would then allow staff to do the review along with MSDE and make a recommendation at the November 21st meeting, which is the next AIB meeting. That is also the meeting before December 1, which is the statutory timeline for when the AIB is to provide a warning if an LEA is at risk of not having their plan approved. So we provided that November 12th date to the LEAs in order to make sure that they had notice about the timeline and when we would need to receive resubmissions in order to turn them around for board approval on November 21st. But we are working with the LEAs across all of these areas for them to be able to meet that timeline and to have a recommendation of approval at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Director Ice?
Yes.
As you know well, from the commission and the drafting of the blueprint, it was always assumed, yes, there would be new money to fund the blueprint, but there was an expectation that we would be doing things differently in the blueprint, called for not doing things we were doing and doing new things. And so reallocation was always intended to be an important part of the funding for the blueprint. Are we seeing, I noticed that we're approving that the question 23 included resource reallocation. Are we seeing meaningful reallocation of funds in the, and I realize meaningful is a sort of non-precise term, but are we seeing meaningful reallocation of funds to support the blueprint?
So the question was, just to be clear, the question 23 is more about the process that they are using to determine whether to allocate or reallocate funds. So sort of the decision process and whether they have a process, who's part of the process, and how ideas are generated and decisions are made, essentially.
Right.
But I do think that there are some promising things happening here and there. I think sort of systemically, I would say we're not necessarily seeing examples that sort of are happening across the districts. That's actually a real focus of for many of the counties with the work that they're doing with their technical assistance partner to really try to help them identify potential opportunities for reallocation. Part of, apologies. It all kind of fits together. And so part of the issue is how the multi-year budget projections feed
Right.
into being able to make decisions about allocation and reallocation. So that's a lot of the work that they're engaging in with their partners right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Were there any other questions on resource allocation? Then I think we can move on to the career ladder. This is, as we talked about at last month's meeting, the career ladder is required to be submitted by July 1st. And it has the components that you can see here on the screen, levels 1 to 3 of the career ladder, as well as the salary scale for levels 1 to 3, including those statutory salary provisions that are in the law, changes in duties and responsibilities for teachers on levels 1 to 3. And then for districts that are planning to either implement level 4 or pilot level 4, a detailed description of that. And then finally, their negotiated first maintenance of certification, which is related to teachers who are national board certified and are required to maintain their national board certification every 5 years in order to both continue to receive the original salary increase, and plus there is an additional salary increase, potential salary increase with the maintenance of certification. And that was due no later than September 1st. You can go to the next slide.
Can I ask a question real quick, Rachel?
Sure, of course.
So, I know so much of what was put in place with the career ladder, and then also the $60,000 starting salary. All of these were an effort to recruit and retain excellent educators. And just curious if we've seen any like early evidence of movement on that. And I know some of this has been a little funky just because the shape of the labor force has changed so dramatically post-COVID. But are we seeing any positive impact in terms of teacher retention or recruitment of teachers as a result of some of these efforts?
That's a great question. I would say at this point, I think the data that would lend itself to that analysis is additional teachers pursuing national board certification, because essentially much of the data that exists reflects teachers who were national board certified prior to the blueprint. And so, but we are seeing tremendous increase in the number of teachers who are pursuing national board in Maryland, and earning. I mean, just recently, the most recent data, Maryland is one of the top states in terms of the number of teachers earning national board certification, and also new teachers earning national board certification, also teachers of color earning national board certification. So in terms of the numbers, we're definitely seeing an impact. In terms of the impact on retention, that's a great question. We're going to need to get a few more years of data to be able to really measure that. And also, but I think that is part of, Dr. Stapleton mentioned the interim evaluation that we have the RFP on the street for, something that will be part of that work. And then I think we also have to try to sort of identify, because other things are happening at the same time. The 10% salary increase for all teachers, and then also districts are working towards the 60,000 minimum salary requirement by July 1 of 2026, which is fiscal 27. Several districts have already met that requirement or are very close to it. So we're also going to have to try to pick apart and we might not be able to as much as we would like, what is having the specifically connect the outcomes to the various policy initiatives. But
it does seem like the teacher retention data should be a data point that we have access to, and we potentially could compare that to nearby states or national, national data to see if it's having some kind of impact, which I presume it is. I mean, even just what the information that you surfaced around national board certification, the logic flows that if you have more teachers that are either have secured national board certification or are going through the national board process, those teachers are less likely to leave the profession, right? So if that is a significant number, then presumably retention rates, at least of that cohort of teachers, would be much higher than other states that don't have many of those additional salary enhancement benefits, career ladders, higher starting minimum salary in place, that we would be outperforming in terms of the teacher retention metrics, which would be significant.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yes, you're absolutely correct. The teacher retention data definitely exists. That's great feedback. And we'll try to incorporate that also in the evaluation. Dr. Kerwin.
Yes. Just to add to this discussion, I happen to know, because I spoke at a national board, the state convening for national board certification, that Maryland had more individuals become national board certified in absolute numbers, even though we're a relatively small state, than any other state in the union, which is really quite remarkable. More than California, which was, for example, number 2. So, Joe, it does play to your point that if we have that, that's probably a factor of retention. And I seem to recall, Rachel, you tell me if I'm misremembering, that we've had an unusually, I shouldn't say unusually, an increase in the number of college students pursuing teacher preparation degrees, which would also suggest that what we're doing is making the profession look more attractive to people to enter and stay in.
I think you're referring to the enrollment in teacher preparation programs.
Yes.
Yeah, and there was. I think Maryland did have a
bump,
a slight, yes. It wasn't a big one, but a slight increase, which is better than many states. And so, yeah, hopefully we can. That is also the changes that the blueprint is supporting is helping with that output data as well. So the slide that you're looking at is just a summary of the status of where we are with the career ladder plans. So you can see that we've been making progress across over the past few months, and you can see that we now have received 23 of the 24 career ladders. We just today received Anne Arundel County's career ladder. So we will be reviewing that, of course. And that just leaves one career ladder that has not been submitted, and that is Baltimore City at this time. At the last,
let me back up. Have we got any
Yes.
indication from Baltimore City in reference to that? Any comment?
No, we have not had any communication from Baltimore City in a number of months.
Okay. Thank you.
So following the board meeting today, we are planning to in writing notify each LEA of whatever components of their plan are still missing or need to be revised, and asking for a status update. So that will include for Baltimore City their career ladder.
Okay.
At last month's meeting, AIB staff recommended 12 career ladder plans for approval, with the caveat that 3 had not submitted their first maintenance of certification yet. And so the recommendation was pending receipt of the first maintenance of certification. As of today, we are able to recommend the approval of 6 additional LEAs for their career ladders. And still one of those, Montgomery County, has not submitted their maintenance of certification. So that recommendation of approval is still pending receipt of their maintenance of certification.
Okay.
And then we are in the process of reviewing 5 plans, one of which Anne Arundel was just received. We have provided feedback to all the districts regarding their plans, except for Anne Arundel, which as said just received, and are working with those districts to make sure that they know what they need to do to receive a recommendation of approval. And then the last line there is just basically the 2 districts that we don't have their maintenance of certification yet are Baltimore City and Montgomery County. So essentially we have 6 additional LEAs recommended for approval today. And then we also wanted to talk about some of the feedback that we wanted to elevate as we've been reviewing the career letters. And I would ask Libby Diamond, policy analyst, who's been working on reviewing the career ladder plans, if you could provide some feedback about those 6.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Are we going to the next slide or just in general, the 6 that were?
Sure, you can.
Great. So I think in general, we, across all of the plans that we have brought to the board for approval, there are some trends and areas of strengths. There are active work groups happening across multiple LEAs. These work groups are bringing different voices to the table to really talk through the career ladder and saying, like, how are we reimagining the teacher professional role and what are we doing differently at each level? So teachers are coming to the table, specialists, NBC teachers are coming to the table, principals, assistant principals. And so really having a diverse group of voices to really make change for these career ladders, which is great to see. There are several or few level 4 pilots happening across the state. 3 that I'd just like to highlight are Kent, Prince George's County, and Anne Arundel County. These 3 LEAs have active level 4 lead teacher role pilots happening in their counties. They're thinking about what these teachers are doing with teachers, with staff and students. They are thinking about scheduling, and they are just thinking about their overall roles. And so we will be interested to hear how those pilots go, how those evaluations end up, and the impact it has on student learning. And then finally, with the career ladders, there have been a few different models emerging. So we have at least 5 LEAs who have indicated through their submissions that they are really transitioning all of their teachers to one cohesive career ladder for all teachers. We have some other folks that are incorporating some of the traditional pay schedules with a new career ladder, the new career ladder levels. And then we have some counties that are allowing teachers to opt into a new career ladder or stay with some traditional or historical teacher pay schedules if they choose to stay in that lane. Any questions about those strengths?
I have one quick question. In the original recommendations from the commission, the decision about advancing on the career ladder was primarily the responsibility of the principal of the school. Is that still the case in these plans as they are being developed?
So that is, go ahead, Rachel. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the statute lays out the process, and so they are following. You know, that was one of the criteria for success is that you're following the statutory requirements. So they are doing that. Another aspect of it related to including other teachers on the career ladder to make a recommendation to the principal, and the statute did, you know, acknowledge that until there are enough teachers on the different levels of the career ladder, they wouldn't be available to be part of that process. So there is sort of a transition period as we move into this process. But Libby, was there something else you were going to add?
No, that was great.
Thank you.
Yes. And Member Robinson, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So clarifying question first, and then a second question. First, you said the districts that you wanted to highlight that were participating in your pilot were Kent, Prince George's, and what was the third one? Was it Anne Arundel?
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you. And then my second question, when you were talking about the different models emerging, are we in a place where we're saying like these are just like we're gonna summarize and share with the different LEAs the different things that people are doing? Are we looking at them like there are pros and cons that we think are, I guess, best practices like statewide? Or is it are we thinking that it's more of going to be a tailored situation for each LEA? Like, what would our next steps be in terms of communicating what we're finding in the different models?
Rachel, I can start, and if you want to add.
That'd be great.
I think that we aren't necessarily saying that one is better than the other of any of these strengths that we've highlighted, but these are things for LEAs to think about and to join a community practice meeting that we're hosting through AIB, just to think about what is best for your local community, right? And what works best to serve your county. And so just sharing just different models, I think is helpful, just so people can, as they're reimagining what this looks like at the county level, they can say, oh, let me take a peek at what that county's doing, you know, and so that we are thinking innovatively about how this can look. Rachel, would you add anything?
I would just add that particularly, you know, there are, Libby noted several LEAs that have active work groups that are working on level 4 of the, specifically around building out level 4 of the career ladder, and making sure that we're sharing, as Libby said, what's happening already in districts, and then also other examples of other ways besides what has been thought about so far in Maryland that might be worth considering. And the career ladder implementation and development is part of one of the focus areas of our technical assistance grants this year. We have a strategy lead that is hosting monthly community of practice meetings with LEAs, both those that specifically, requested that assistance, but also all LEAs are invited to participate in the community of practice and learn from each other, and learn from experts about what to consider.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I think one of the pieces that the AIB and our community practices and working with LEAs between now and the next submission that will be due in July of 2025 is this piece around how are we thinking innovatively about what teachers do at each level to demonstrate their competency in performing their jobs at those new levels. And what are the opportunities that teachers will be provided to actually practice the skills and the knowledge they need to demonstrate readiness to advance to the next level of the career ladder if they choose to do so. And so I think we're going to really be talking about that in our community practices. And I know our work groups are working on that. And so that's a big piece that we are going to be tackling. Oh, Rachel, you're on mute.
Yep. And specifically, we are working with MSDE to develop very specific guidance and criteria for success around what the next submission of the career ladder that Libby just mentioned. Districts have already begun meeting and doing this work. And so we recognize that the importance of providing that guidance as soon as possible, meaning in November, in the next month. And then I just wanted to add that the specific feedback forms for the 6 counties that are recommended for approval today are in the Google Drive folder for Allegheny, Baltimore County, Calvert County, Cecil County, Garrett County, and Howard County. So those are available. And if anybody has any questions about any of those specifics, we're happy to answer them. And I see Member Lynch has her hand up.
I think you sort of answered it. We have this kind of complicated intersection of the career ladders needing to be both negotiated, but also meeting with the criteria as set forth within the blueprint. And so that was sort of my question, because the blueprint has these expectations around things like teacher professors and sort of distinguished principals and and so I guess my question is, what is the role of the AIB in looking at these career ladders that maybe have been negotiated but don't fully meet with statutory guidelines? Or is there a role?
So we are not recommending any career ladder to the board for approval if it does not meet the statutory requirements. So that is the criteria for success for this initial career ladder plan. And so we have provided feedback to districts, over the past few months around where we had questions or where we had concerns that it didn't meet the statutory requirement, and they responded to us, and in some cases have gone back and clarified their career ladder to ensure that it complies with statute. So that there are not any that do not meet the statutory requirements for levels 1 through 3, just to be clear. We gave them additional time to submit level 4 of the teacher career ladder and the administrator career ladder. So level 4 will be part of next year's submission.
But I think the statute only places a framework, and they have some latitude within that and flexibility to, I guess you look at this as a framework or the floor for which they build from. But this is why you get some level of difference between 1 to 3, I would imagine, and also to 4. But it does not precisely lay out every detail of it.
Exactly.
And Rachel, just for clarity, there are 2 separate career ladders, one for administrators and one for teachers. I'm not sure that I had read the statute that way. So I think that's,
so the career level 1 to 3 is everybody, it's teachers. And then level 4 kind of has it goes off into 2 lanes, the teacher lane and the administrator lane.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, an additional question? Thanks for your question.
Okay, if not, I think we can zoom through the next couple of slides because we don't have any additional information. We had previously recommended all 24 LEAs for approval for meeting that they have submitted the attestation that they provided at least the 10% salary increase over the past 5 years. So all 24 LEAs have been recommended for approval for that. And if we can go to the next slide, all 24 LEAs have also been recommended for approval by MSDE of their comprehensive literacy plans. And we had some deep discussion about this at the last board meeting with the Maryland Initiative for Literacy and Equity, or MILE, folks who came and presented on their findings on the literacy plans. So all 24 LEAs have also been recommended for approval for their literacy plans at this time. If there aren't any questions on either of those, then we can move to the last component. Member Manka. Yes.
So this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but we had talked before about trying to find a counterpart to the Mile Center that would be able to have the knowledge and expertise in order to review, either engage in expert reviews for schools around math, or potentially even standing up a separate system where there was math plans that needed to be submitted. I mean, it seems like with just the big deficits in math that you're seeing across the state, on the most recent round of MCAP assessments, that some of that would be warranted and something that we should look into. Have we made any progress? We found any a good partner that we feel like would be able to fill that capacity?
Great question. And we actually just were meeting with the MSDE yesterday and received an update on this very topic. So MSDE has selected Johns Hopkins University, the Institute for Education Policy, to support the math instruction support and review of the comprehensive math plans. So under the comprehensive plan, LEAs are required to submit their full comprehensive math plans to AIB and MSDE by June of 2025. And then we provided a date by which they had to submit a draft. And that was September 30th for the pre-K-5 plans. And so those have been received, and MSDE and Johns Hopkins are in the process of reviewing those draft plans and providing feedback. They had provided guidance around what should be included in the comprehensive plans. And we can certainly, if you would like, ask them to come provide an update to the board around their work and that partnership.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And then, in any thought or headway around incorporating them into a future round of expert review team visits?
So they are. doing that. So they actually, that is part of the work that Johns Hopkins will be doing this school year. And I can't remember the exact number of schools that are being visited, but I want to say maybe 30 or so are also part of the expert review team visits that are being planned. So as you may recall, for the MSDE expert review team visits for this school year, visits are focused on elementary literacy and elementary math. And so some schools are being visited for both literacy and math. And so Johns Hopkins will be part of that work for those that are being visited for math, as well as they selected some additional schools to visit that are not part of the expert review team list for various reasons. Some of which because they identified a gap in the schools that were being visited that either didn't reflect some lower performing schools or didn't reflect some higher performing schools, or actually didn't reflect sort of those that sort of are in the middle. So it's a combination, and we'll get you the exact numbers of supporting the expert review teams and their visits when they're focused on math, and doing additional visits of elementary schools focused on math.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
It's
math
an
instruction.
excellent point, Joe. I'm glad you raised it. Unfortunately, with math, there is no agreed upon strategy for learning math like we have with literacy. There's no counterpart to the science of reading and mathematics. And this makes it very difficult to come up with some generally agreed upon approach and a consistency across the state. So math is going to be, I think, even more of a challenge in this regard than literacy.
Member Lynch?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a minute to really just sort of sit and highlight the strong work that's been happening around literacy around the state. I think the partnership between MILE and the MSDE, I know, and with the AIB, it has been just the incredible work of so many different teams coming together to lay this strong foundation. And as a state, we've been looking very closely at what our reading scores have been. And I think it's just important to sort of note that this provides now this wonderful framework that I think that we can start to build upon. And so we had to build the house first before we can start to move forward. So, it seems like, oh, they just have accepted their literacy plans, but every LEA has worked really hard. MSDE has worked hard. MILE has worked hard to get these plans. And so I'm looking forward now to sort of reviewing progress based on that. And, hopefully the LEAs will get the technical assistance they need to make sure that they're implementing with fidelity and that they're getting whatever supports that they need to be able to do this work well, now that they have a good framework within which to do it. But I think we can't underscore just how much work has gone into that at this point. And, it's really exciting to look forward to the next steps.
Thank you. So we will talk to MSDE about either in November or December, if we could, or soon, have MSDE and Johns Hopkins provide a briefing and an update on the math instruction work. Okay, I think we can move on to career counseling. So career counseling MOU is the final component of the LEA plan approvals for this year. And as a reminder, the career counseling program under the Blueprint, it's a new middle and high school career counseling program that for the first 3 years, at least, of the program, the statute requires the local workforce development boards to work in collaboration with the LEAs and the community colleges to develop and implement this career counseling program. And so as part of that, those three entities were required to enter into an MOU to identify the roles and responsibilities of the various partners, as well as a framework of what is part of their career counseling program. So working with our partners at MSDE and the CTE committee last year, a framework or a rubric for what needed to be included in the MOU was provided to all of the partners, and they did submit MOUs, and that was part of the approval process last year. This year, most of the districts, most of the partners, 18 of them did need to provide an updated MOU for this year, primarily because their initial MOU did not include a budget it only included a budget for the first year and didn't include a budget for the next 2 years. So most of them needed to submit an updated MOU primarily for that reason, although not exclusively. To date, we've received 11 revised career counseling MOUs, and 6 of them are recommended for approval today. As with the other elements, we do have the feedback forms available in the folder for each of the 6 that are recommended for approval. And that includes Caroline County, Carroll County, Garrett County, Montgomery County, St. Mary's County, and Talbot County. So those are the 6. The other 5 that have been received are in various stages of review and feedback and, review of revisions. We're, in addition to that, we are awaiting 6 additional submissions. Sorry, 7. Sorry, getting my math wrong here. 7 additional submissions, and as I said, 6 that are not required to submit an updated MOU this year. Are there any questions about career counseling? We can certainly provide more information if you'd like it. But as I said, the primary revisions relate to the budget and how the partners have agreed to spend the funds on the program for this current school year. And in some cases, how they're going to be using funds that were not spent in the last fiscal year, how those monies are allowed to carry forward, and how they've agreed to use those funds. Member Lynch.
I know this is just about budget, but it's sometime maybe in the spring, I think it would be great to have to hear a little bit more about how this is going in the school systems,
Mhm.
hear what is, from school systems that feel like they have kind of caught a structure that's working for them, or, share some additional supports that they may need.
Absolutely. We do, AIB, MSD, and CT committee, we do meet regularly as partners, and then we do have check-ins with the partnerships to sort of check in on how it's going, what supports they need, and also try to provide some guidance around facilitating moving forward in the work. But that's an excellent idea. Oh, and also, actually, we did just receive earlier this month. So the statute requires each career counseling program to submit a report on their activities and the use of funds. So due to the timing of when final financial data is available, we kind of split that into 2 reports. So they submitted a report on July 1st around their program activities. And now they just recently have submitted a report on the use of funds. And so we're in the process of reviewing those and marrying up the two pieces so that we can also provide some feedback to them around that, as well as share what we learn with the board. And so that also would be a great opportunity to ask, sort of a panel perhaps of folks from the counties to come share with the board.
Okay.
Okay. So the next slide, we just really, I think we've touched on this along the way, so I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially just wanted to elevate the fact that we're working with the LEAs to support them in being able to meet the criteria for success in these various areas and have a recommendation of approval of their plans for 2024, as well as ongoing assistance to support the work that they're doing over to implement the blueprint and also to develop like their submission for next year for the career ladder through the technical assistance program. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about technical assistance in a little while, but we just wanted to sort of make sure that it's clear that obviously the goal of all of us is to support blueprint implementation and to, get to yes, so that, LEAs can move forward in implementing the blueprint. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, and actually, Emma, if you could pull up the status chart for the screen, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Just one moment.
Thank you. So we have a chart, the chart that we shared with you last month. We have updated the chart to reflect the current status for each LEA across the 5 components of plan approval. There are actually 6 columns. Thank you. I was going to say, Emma, that's going to have to get bigger. Thank you. That's perfect. So that we can see all of them. And so, as you can see, we've got 6 columns. The reason there are 6 and not 5 is the career ladder is broken into 2 columns to reflect the initial career ladder submission, which was July 1st, and then the maintenance certification, which was due by September 1st. Actually, there are 7 columns, apologies. And so essentially, in order for an LEA's full plan to be approved, and with that approval, the board's decision to release the automatically withheld blueprint funds, an LEA has to have a check mark in every column or not applicable in the case of the career counseling MOU. And so you can see that we've made a lot of progress. The LEAs are making a lot of progress in revising their plans and resubmitting. So we're definitely making progress. And at this time, there are 2 counties that actually have met the requirements across all of the components. And those are Garrett County and St. Mary's County. There are several districts that are very close, and in some cases we just literally kind of ran out of time to get across the finish line for this board meeting. But there are several counties that are very close, and so we are feeling confident that most, if not all of them, will be able to move forward at the next board meeting, assuming we receive the resubmissions. And so we do have a recommendation today to fully approve the LEA plans for those 2 counties, Garrett County and St. Mary's County. And there is a motion, which I'm happy to read.
Yeah, why
If
don't you read,
you,
please?
okay. Yes. Okay. The motion reads, after careful consideration of the recommendations of the Accountability and Implementation Board staff and the Maryland State Department of Education, and based on our own independent review of all documents provided by the LEAs, fill in the blank, move that the board approve the 2024 Blueprint for Maryland's Future Implementation Plan submitted by the following LEAs and authorize release of the fiscal year 2025 Blueprint funds that are automatically withheld by law. And that would be for Garrett County Public Schools and St. Mary's County Public Schools.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Are any questions to the motion as read, approving Garrett and St. Mary's County? Well, let me first of all acknowledge the hard work of Garrett and St. Mary's County for their timely submission and the hard work that I know that they put in to get this done. I know that it's not been easy and we expect others to follow, but I wanted to move forward today in recognition of their hard work and effort. Hopefully at our next meeting, we'll approve a number of others. Why don't we briefly go through the process of what happens in the next stages of this development in terms of our potential action, Madam Executive Director.
Mr. Chair, do you want to take action on the motion first?
No, I want that as part of the
Okay.
background. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Emma, can you go to the next slide? So the next steps, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, for those districts that have not met all of the requirements yet, as I said, we do have this December 1 deadline where the AIB has to provide a warning if an LEA is at risk of their automatically withheld blueprint funds not being released. And this is consistent with state law and also the policy that the board adopted last year. We've given LEAs the date of November 12th to provide any resubmissions or clarifications or response to requests for additional information, so that we have enough time to review all of those and hopefully have a recommendation for approval at the November 21 board meeting, which is that meeting prior to December 1st. If an LEA is not able to receive a recommendation of approval on November 21, then the next date is going to be January 16th, which is the date that we're asking for additional resubmissions to be provided, again, to give staff time to review all of the materials. And then the AIB, right now, tentatively, there will be a meeting the last week of January. January 30th is that Thursday, and prior to February 1st. And then February 1st is the date that the AIB is required to make a decision to either approve or not approve an LEA's release of funds, which then triggers that appeal process that was adopted by the board also last year. So if an LEA does receive a decision of not releasing funds by February 1st, there is an appeal process that LEAs can engage in with the AIB before a final decision is made within 60 days of the appeal. So this is just the beginning, really, of this process.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. You understand the ramification, the process that will follow. The motion is to approve for Garrett and St. Mary's County. Any additional questions or comment in reference to the motion? If not, I'll now call for a vote on the motion. All in favor,
Mr. Chair, sorry, we need someone to move the motion and second.
Yeah, I thought we had.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and properly second. Any further questions or comment on the motion? Okay, hearing none. We all understand the ramifications of the motion and what we're approving today and the process going forward. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is approved, and thank you again, Garrett and St. Mary's County.
And very
Thank
quickly,
you.
I'd just like to thank Rachel and her team who are actually reviewing all of these plans and giving that feedback. I know that is a lot of work, so thank you.
I do also want to acknowledge the hard work of all the LEAs and their partners, as well as our partners at MSDE, who are all very engaged in this. It is a tremendous amount of work, and we definitely appreciate it from our perspective and also from the LEAs and all of our partners' perspective. So really want to obviously congratulate Garrett County and St. Mary's County. And I look forward to being able to recommend many, many more LEAs for approval at the next board meeting. Okay. That would bring us to our next agenda item, which is a very brief update on the state agency implementation plan review process that we are also engaged in concurrently. And I will ask Emma if you could provide that update.
Absolutely. So we have, like Rachel said, a brief update about this, and I think my camera's not working. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Okay. So far, the plans that have been submitted to the AIB, again, back in August, are the Maryland State Department of Education's implementation plan from MHEC, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, the CT Committee, and the Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports. All of those plans have been read and reviewed by AIB staff. And the plan that still is to be submitted on October 31st, that is the due date, is the Juvenile Services Education Program implementation plan. So we're excited to get that plan next week, because next week is the end of October, believe it or not. In terms of next steps with the status of reviews, all state agency plans, like I said, have been reviewed by AIB staff against the approved criteria for success that we shared way back when. And AIB staff are meeting with agency staff moving forward to share the results of that review process. That includes identifying areas of strength and opportunity, as well as growth and improvement as part of these discussions that were elevated by staff in reviewing the plans, but also to discuss any potential areas for revision. So we'll be meeting with staff, and then from there, we'll ask them to submit updated versions of their implementation plans to meet the criteria for success. And that will be as needed, on an as needed basis, following the meeting with agency staff. So we will continue to provide updates around agencies that are close to meeting the criteria for success or have met the criteria for success in the upcoming AIB meetings. But that is just a quick update about where we are, and looking forward to providing more information during our next meeting.
Okay.
Any questions? Rachel, did you want to add anything?
No, that was great. I think we're good. I actually am having a little technical difficulty, so I can't see if anyone has their hand up. So if you do, please come off mute and ask your question.
I don't think anybody does.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, then we can move on to our next agenda item, which is the Career and Technical Education Committee has submitted a couple of items for AIB review and approval. And we also have with us, she has joined, the Executive Director of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, and also the CTE Committee, Rachel Stevens Parker, who is here to answer questions related to these two items. And at last month's board meeting, we had some very good, I think, discussion around some of the work of the CTE committee, specifically around the industry recognized credential policy. And we talked about asking the CTE committee to come to future board meetings. So Rachel is here today specifically for these two items and any questions that she may be able to respond to. And then we are, in fact, I think during this meeting, I received a confirmation that the chair of the CTE committee is available to come to the board's November meeting and provide some more information. So we will look forward to that. So the first submission that we have for your review, and AIB staff is recommending approval with some considerations of the CTE committee's expert review team deployment plan. And this includes this upcoming school year, as well as sort of their overall, at this time, plan for the expert review team process for the CTE programs. And just as a reminder, so similar to MSDE, but not the same, the statute did create an expert review team program for the career pathways and the CTE programs as part of the blueprint. This is the first official year of the CTE expert review teams, and they have recently begun their school visits for this school year. Last year, there was a pilot where they visited, I think, 2 LEAs to sort of develop a model for how to build out this work. And as part of their plan, it is basically broken into 3 phases. And we're in the first phase, which is that the expert review visit teams will visit all 24 LEAs over the next 2 school years. So this year and next year, in order to basically get a baseline data around what our CTE programs and what districts are doing in their they have different models for delivery of CTE in different districts. So getting a better baseline of what is happening, both in terms of the data and also the organization and the implementation of CTE around the state. And as I mentioned, the first visits have begun, and it includes CTE committee staff and members. AIB staff has participated, CTE directors from other LEAs, as well as MSDE staff, and also local workforce development board staff, and possibly others. It's a broad group that they're drawing from for their expert review teams. And then I would just share, and you can see on the slide deck there, that we've identified, as we do for most things that we review, strengths and then some suggestions for consideration. And so obviously the structure that has been put in place, I think it's very collaborative with the LEAs and with the workforce boards and MSDE in terms of really trying to ensure that there's a real sort of 360-degree kind of view of what's happening in the LEA around CTE. But of course, one day visit to 2 schools is not going to give you, the full picture of just like with the MSD expert review teams. We're not expecting those visits to tell us everything that we need or want to know about blueprint implementation. And so same holds here. And so some of our suggestions are sort of more around how to get even more feedback and more of a baseline of data and sort of a landscape analysis of what's happening in the districts around CTE, in addition to the visits that are already underway. But we definitely, the approach of using these first visits to sort of try to get a sense of what's happening in each district rather than sort of school by school, we think makes a lot of sense in how the CTE committee has structured their plan. And then we just provide some other feedback around things to consider. Some of it is very, practical in terms of, the timing of planning to visit schools in May, which might become challenging with the school calendar. And then also a suggestion to perhaps pull more data in the in advance, just to sort of streamline make sure that folks have a good context for what is going on in the district as the visits begin. And then I think the follow-up of what comes next after the visits is still being developed. So how to use the visits to support the LEAs in strengthening their CTE programs and aligning with the blueprint's goals, as well as industry needs. And then as we need to do, not just in this area, but really defining what CTE pathways really look like and how we're going to monitor and measure progress. And that is not something just specific to CTE committee or this topic, but it's certainly something that we're also focused on and working with CTE committee and MSDE as we think about that. So with that, if there are any questions, I would be happy to ask Rachel Parker to respond to them. But of course, if there are questions for AIB, also happy to respond to that. And I see that Rachel did share that Howard County, maybe I shouldn't call them out here publicly, did agree to a visit in May. So that's okay, great. I see Member Lynch has a question. Does anyone else? Member Lynch?
Yes, no, I think this is great feedback, and I think the work that's been done by the CTE committee on standing this up has been fantastic. My only consideration is just the variability of our school districts across the state in terms of both size and offerings, as well as diversity of our students. So, my only suggestion would be to maybe just think about what might be the appropriate amount of schools to visit, or sort of that it wouldn't be kind of a set 2 by 2 by 2 for every single school district. But for some, you may need more, for some, you may need less in order to get that really sort of robust set of sampling without being overburdensome to the work.
Thank you for that, Member Lynch. And I will say on that point, I think that's a really great point. We did strive to look at district diversity on multiple levels in the distribution of where we visited this first year and kind of getting a good mix. And on the point you're making, I think, our CTE expert review team manager, John Strickland, has been doing a great job working closely with each district to plan these out for the coming year. And so we'll relay this feedback to him as a point of, talking to each district and saying, hey, is this the plan that makes sense? Or, there certainly is potentially an option to rethink that number and kind of what some of those details look like in each district, to your point. So thank you for that feedback. And I also want to thank the board while I'm speaking. I want to thank the board for these other suggestions as well. They're very welcome and really very in line with kind of where the committee wants to take this work next, even as we roll out these ERTs. And I'm really pleased to share as well that we're building our staff capacity. We were given some additional positions in the budget for the current fiscal year, and actually just posted for a research analyst position. So if you know anyone, great, send them our way, who will support some of this work, including some of these points you've made about the pre-visit data collection. So happy to share that too. And we'll make sure that the next iteration of this plan that we produce for you annually kind of more explicitly articulates several of these points here. And we also hear the feedback from the definitional piece as well, and look forward, Rachel, to working with you and your team and this board on that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the expert review team plan? If not, we do have a motion. Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Okay. After careful consideration of the recommendations of the AIB staff and based on our own independent review of all documents provided by the CTE committee, the AIB moves to approve the expert review team deployment plan for the 24-25 school year with the following feedback for future consideration. The AIB recommends that the CTE committee review the feasibility of the visit schedule, given both the CTE committee staff capacity and the school calendar. Also, we suggest making clear that these early visits are not evaluative and are intended as listening learning visits to collect baseline data and a landscape analysis of CTE across the 24 LEAs. Number 2 is consider ways to partner more closely with MSD, particularly on the pre-visit data collection and the post-visit analysis, and recommendations to make use of MSDE staff CTE expertise and insights. Number 3 is to consider how the information collected will be used by the CTE committee to support LEAs and to strengthen and expand CTE offerings and improve alignment to industry needs, career pathways, and industry recognized credentials. And finally, provide the timeline approach the CTE committee will take to develop clear guidance and definitions around all CTE terms and goals, in particular what constitutes adequate progress towards completion of a CTE pathway.
As described in the blueprint. Okay. I'm going to make the motion that we approve this plan for 24-25. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second. The motion is now on the floor. Any further explanation, questions, or feedback as relates to the motion on the floor? I can't see Madam Executive Director.
There are no hands.
Okay. All right. Ready for the question. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing or seeing none, and the motion is approved. I think.
Great.
Yeah.
We have one more item for the CTE committee.
This item.
If you can go to the next slide. And this is a document is called Apprenticeships for High School Students. So this policy was submitted by, sorry, I gotta find my document, the right document. This policy is meant to provide guidance on the apprenticeship pathways that support and count towards the blueprint's goal that 45% of high school students complete the high school level of an apprenticeship or another industry recognized credential. The policy essentially, has two pathway options under apprenticeships. What is considered sort of the gold standard is the high school portion of a registered apprenticeship, which includes substantial training time at least 250 hours of on-the-job training and 144 hours of related instruction. So this is the more the registered apprenticeship programs or pathways are currently exist in some industries. They primarily do not involve high school students currently, although we're building the pool of these registered apprenticeships where students can actually start that process while they're still in high school, which is of course the goal of the blueprint and the students who are these post-college and career ready pathways, as we call them. The second option is for youth apprenticeship, which results in a student earning an industry recognized credential. This is a change to the existing youth apprenticeship program that has existed for a number of years. It also includes substantial training time, actually 450 hours of on-the-job training, and at least a year of related instruction. Those are the two apprenticeship pathways that are outlined in the policy. And the policy also includes guidance around how our LEAs can incorporate apprenticeship opportunities into high school. And this includes, of course, the CTE programs, either the existing programs or, revised programs, and dual enrollment through our higher education partners to meet the related instruction requirements of the apprenticeship. And then also that students are able to earn graduation credit for the time spent in an apprenticeship through the on-the-job training and that related instruction component. And then it also includes some guidance for LEAs and high schools to consider to modify schedules and encourage flexibility for when the related instructional hours are completed, which may not, of course, be just during the school day, but before and after, on the weekends, and also potentially in the summer. And then the policy also does begin to identify the steps that are going to be needed to develop and support these apprenticeship pathways at scale, particularly working with employers sponsor these programs. And so that is obviously a very significant challenge that I know the CTE committee is aware of that challenge to really work with employers to be willing to and incentivized to participate in these apprenticeship programs. So we think that this is a really good start to something that is a big piece of the blueprint and doing things differently. We do, of course, have some suggestions for consideration, and you can see them here on the slide. But, part of it is just around messaging for students and for parents around the opportunity of apprenticeships and both, we need both the supply of available apprenticeships, but through working with employers, and then we need demand from students to actually want to participate then. So it's sort of, we've got to work on both sides of the needs. And as I said, engaging employers in this work is, I know a top priority. And I know Secretary Wu is also very focused on this for the Department of Labor. And with a potential focus on certain industry areas or workforce needs and sort of prioritizing certain fields as part of that work, organizing regular meetings of key state agency partners to coordinate the work. I know that is an ongoing effort. And then and you may have this, and it's just not something that that we've seen or that others have seen, but sort of like, what is the apprenticeship landscape currently? Because similar to, you know, other aspects of the blueprint, I'll be in a meeting and I'll hear about, an apprenticeship program that is happening in a specific community college that, has potential promise for scaling. And so sort of like, do we have a good inventory of that, and how do we build on that, and how can we help in supporting that work? So with that, if there are any questions for me or Rachel?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Kerwin.
Yeah, there's so much interest in CTE around the country. And although I think we at least have goals that would put us out ahead of the rest of the country. I'm just wondering to the extent to which you've done any kind of survey of successful apprenticeship programs elsewhere, and is there anything we can learn from what's going on elsewhere?
That's a wonderful question. And Rachel, if you don't mind, I'm happy to start. And obviously, of course, welcome your colleagues here too. Some of that sort of work and surveying was actually a big part of my role prior to joining the Governor's Workforce Development Board when I was at the National Governors Association. And we've certainly been working to bring some of those, not just national, but global best practices into how we think about this policy. What's exciting and challenging about what we're trying to do is it really is different. Getting high school students involved in registered apprenticeship that continues after graduation is not something very many states have done. Really, no state has done in significant numbers. And so we're working to position ourselves to be leaders, but building on things that do seem really promising or like they're starting to work well in other states. For instance, thinking about kind of who's going out there and working with employers to understand their needs and then sell them on this model, help them understand how the model can really benefit their businesses. And in thinking about how we might introduce, some new, whether it's incentives, resources to support that work. And of course, in all this and really all the suggestions here, these are things we're working very closely with the sister agencies, especially those on the committee, in the case of apprenticeship, in particular, the Department of Labor, to ensure that we do effectively and with the right expertise, and that this translates into action within those agencies that must ultimately kind of really conduct and administer and operationalize a lot of this work. So I think that's kind of my sort of overall answer, and we provide a couple of sort of signals towards some best practices we've looked at in some of the appendix materials of the policy, and happy to expand a little bit further. But I think weaving that in is sort of definitely one step we took as we were developing this over the past 9 to 10 months to ensure that we were building on things and making some suggestions in the suggestions within the policy, the requested actions, I should say, within the policy that reflect some of those best practices.
Okay.
Member Lynch?
Yes, thank you. I think in some of my work with industry partners, we hear some consistent feedback around whether it's registered apprenticeships or credentialing programs, of this need to build some of these basic skills, things like communication, time management, money management, cooperation. What I think we have a really interesting opportunity as we start to think about the build out of related instruction, especially in that youth apprenticeship space, is how are we making sure that our young people are getting that incredibly explicit instruction? We focus a lot on those industry related skills, and yet feedback is so consistent when we hear with industry partners about the skills that are actually missing. And so I'm not asking you to comment today, but just sort of as a think about that, we're being really purposeful in that collaboration with the Department of Labor about what related instruction looks like, and maybe the opportunity to do mini credentialing or badging or something to start to really identify the mastery of those core skills as they're moving through that apprenticeship process.
Thank you. And if I can ask a clarifying question so I can take this feedback kind of home with me. When you say building this in, especially into the youth apprenticeship space, are you referring to the high school level of a registered apprenticeship, or are you referring to the youth apprenticeship program?
I think both, really. You know, I think
Thank you.
I
That
think
makes sense.
even with the even student, you know, whether or not they're youth or whether or not they're adults who are in apprenticeship spaces, the feedback from industry partners remains the same. So I think the earlier that we can be building those competencies, the more ready they will be to enter that workplace.
Absolutely. And we've been hearing similar feedback in our work with our industry tables through the Governor's Workforce Board as well. So thank you. Thank you for that suggestion.
And if I can just add on, I think it's also a great opportunity to connect the career counseling programs that are still, you know, being developed, to make sure that we're giving students all the information that they need, and you know, and giving them access to the skills and the competencies that they need to be able to move into these pathways.
And if I can kind of add on to your add-on, Rachel, I noticed in the report that the CTE committee has done this great job of identifying that technical assistance and additional training is really needed for those career counselors across the state. And what I would offer is that I think there's an opportunity for the CTE committee to be the leader and the coordinator in that space, to coordinate industry partners, to coordinate our higher ed partners, our community colleges, to make sure that those pathways are clearly understood by our CTE, by our career counselors, and just sort of bringing all of those resources to bear that may not be immediately observable to our LEAs and workforce development boards.
Thank you. We love that suggestion. And I know actually, Rachel, I believe we're meeting soon to kind of discuss some roles and responsibility detail there. So thank you, Member Lynch. I think that's a great suggestion.
And specifically training for career counselors, which is something that I think we all agree would be very valuable. Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands, so I can go ahead and read the motion. Oops. Okay. After careful consideration of the recommendations of the AIB staff and based on our independent review of documents provided by the CTE committee, the AIB moves to approve the apprenticeships for high school students in Maryland policy with following feedback for future consideration. Regarding the apprenticeship definition and proposed action steps for expanding apprenticeship opportunities for students statewide, the AIB recommends that the CTE committee develop a more detailed plan for engaging employers that discusses specific priority industries, an analysis of which industries are best suited to sponsor registered and youth apprenticeships, and how the CTE committee will convene business and labor representatives to identify skills, standards, training sequences, and credentials. Again, organize regular meetings of partners to improve coordination and communication, provide a more in-depth analysis of youth apprenticeships and high school level apprenticeships that exist currently and what might be done to expand them, including connecting to CTE programs of study and tapping into existing employer partnerships, and consider equity challenges in apprenticeship expansion and what supports, guidance, and assistance might be needed for more rural communities with fewer employers. And then in addition, the AIB previously provided feedback on the industry recognized credential policy of the CTE committee that included the definition of the 45% goal. And staff from AIB and the CTE committee have been discussing this issue and are continuing to do so also with our partners at MSDE, so that we can all reach an agreement on this definition of how industry recognized credentials will be counted towards the 45% goal. So that is the motion, Mr. Chair.
I'll move it.
Okay, I'll second the motion then. All right, in the discussion on the motion on the floor, apprenticeship for high school students feedback that we just, that Rachel just read a moment ago.
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, no hands are raised. All right, all in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing or seeing none, the motion is so approved. We will now take a 5-minute break. We're going to do 10 minutes, come back at 3:25. 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Okay, are we about ready? Both the people back?
I think we're close.
Okay.
And would Emma or Shawanda, could someone share their screen with the slide decks? We can run through the last agenda item. Thank you, Emma. Okay, so the last agenda item is the executive director update. And the first item is a staffing update. And we are have been working on doing the behind the scenes work to be able to recruit for our 4 vacant positions, which includes the government relations director and the fiscal administrator, which are both new positions. And then a policy analyst primarily focused on Pillar 1 in early childhood and Pillar 5 and fiscal and policy analyst. And these are positions that we have previously recruited for and we're not able to identify any candidates to fill, to ultimately hire. So we are going to move forward with recruiting for these positions, with the first priority being the government relations director, as we would want that person to be on board prior to the legislative session beginning.
Okay.
If there aren't any questions about staffing, we can move on to our finance update, which really revolves around the technical assistance grant that we've talked about a little bit over the course of the meeting. So just as a reminder, phase 1 of our technical assistance grant was funded last year during the fiscal 24 cycle, and we did provide a no-cost extension to LEAs that had not spent down their grant funds by the end of the fiscal year, and so they have until the end of December to spend down those grants, and those grants are for the strategic facilitators that have been working with districts since for about a year now to support developing their implementation plans and implementing their implementation plans. And so we have 23 grants that we're providing for strategic facilitators that were provided for phase 1. In phase 2 of our grant program for fiscal 25, we are continuing to fund strategic facilitators based on the interest in the LEAs and the strategic facilitator continuing to do the work. In a couple of cases, there have been some changes in strategic facilitators. And so you can see that we have 22 grants that are supporting strategic facilitators in phase 2. For those districts that have a phase 1 balance that they haven't spent down yet, they have only, up to this point, phase 2 has just been involved in developing the plan for phase 2, but they are spending down and finishing their phase 1 work before they move into phase 2. In addition, we're also funding specific focus areas in addition to the strategic facilitators this year, and that includes resource allocation, which is our #1 priority focus for this year with the districts, as well as the other 3 focus areas are pre-K expansion, career ladder, and college and career readiness. And you can see for resource allocation, we currently have 18 of our districts participating in the resource allocation technical assistance. 2 additional LEAs requested following the feedback on the question 23 response. 2 additional district, we offered the possibility of still receiving assistance, and 2 LEAs have asked for that. So we're in the process of pairing them with a partner. And so for resource allocation and also the other focus areas, it's a little complicated, unfortunately. But what we've done, and let's just focus on resource allocation, is we have identified strategy leads that are then leading the work and helping to support the work in collaboration with AIB for all the other partners that are part of the work. So there are strategy leads for resource allocation and also for pre-K expansion, career ladder, and college and career readiness. And so for each of those areas, there are monthly communities of practice around the topic, as well as office hours, both office hours based on AIB and the strategy leads identifying a need for office hours, and also at the request of LEAs if they need individualized, or it could be more than one, asking for additional support around a topic. And then for the resource allocation, each of the what will be 20 LEAs have specifically been paired with a partner. And we identified 5 partners that are doing the work with a cohort of LEAs based on some similarities in what their interest was in doing the work. And so that work has began actually in July, and we're actually next week hosting a community of practice that actually will include county governments. You may recall that we gave a priority for districts that were included their counties in this work, and but we're also inviting all of the counties to participate in the community of practice around resource allocation to build on some of the meetings that we've had over the past year with MACO and with specific counties around working in partnership with their LEAs to address blueprint implementation and help work through some of the challenges of the policy implementation and the budgeting. And then for the other focus areas, we actually did not have as many LEAs ask for specific additional partner to help them in these areas. There are some. You can see 1 for pre-K expansion, 3 for career ladder, and 2 for LEAs. But what we've done is really opened up those community of practices. So in addition to the strategy leads working with those specific LEAs, they will also be working in the community of practice around supporting all of the LEAs in, just focusing on the career ladder, supporting all of the LEAs in thinking about how to build out level 4 of their career ladder, and connecting it with some of what we talked about earlier around what are changes in or roles and responsibilities or opportunities that teachers and leaders will have to sort of be able to acquire the skills to move up the career ladder, and just really both have a regular monthly opportunity for LEAs to share what they're doing and for experts to share ideas about what to think about. And so that is sort of happening in all of these focus areas has already begun and throughout the rest of the year.
Rachel?
Yes.
The pre-K expansion request raised an issue I was wanting to ask about is, do we have any idea of the enrollment in Blueprint pre-K 4-year-old programs? Do we know what the enrollment is?
We know what the enrollment was last year.
Uh-huh.
We do not have enrollment data for the current year yet.
We don't. And do we have any estimate of what the what the demand is, so to speak? What is the universe? In other words, I'm curious as to how close we are to meeting the pre-K
Goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so that is literally what we are having conversations with MSDE about, is really we have to agree on a definition of, to your question, sort of what is the universe that we're trying to reach, particularly in this first phase of expansion, which is that all 4-year-olds who are low income, who are from
who
low
want
income
it or being
households.
served.
Who want to enroll, exactly. And so we are that is something that we have is on the to-do list.
Right. I'm very interested in that. So
urgent to-do list. Yes.
Good. I'm glad you're working on that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about technical assistance, and or is there anything that from my team that I failed to mention? Okay. The next item is the interim evaluation RFP. And we also touched on this a little bit earlier. So as you all know, the blueprint law requires both an interim and a final evaluation of the blueprint's implementation. The interim evaluation was originally actually going to be due this fall, and that timeline was adjusted in the law, and it is now due to be completed by December 1st of 2026. And then the AIB is to submit the interim evaluation and its recommendations for any changes to the law based on the evaluation's findings by January 15th of 2027. The law identifies some very specific elements that need to be part of the interim evaluation, which is very much focused on essentially what are districts doing to implement the blueprint, evaluating the impact of that, and how they are using the funds that they have to support blueprint implementation. And the RFP itself is posted on the AIB website under solicitations. And in addition, it is also, was released to, the state's e-Maryland marketplace. We held a pre-proposal conference last week, and we had very good attendance and received quite a number of, we didn't have that many questions that were submitted in advance, maybe 6 or maybe 10, but we did by the end of the day receive quite a few questions, 42 questions that we are working our way through responding to. The proposals are due on November 19th. And then once we receive the proposals, there will be an evaluation committee to review the proposals and interview those selected for interviews. And our goal, which is ambitious, is to bring a recommendation for a contract award at the board's December 19th meeting, which would then allow the evaluation to begin in early January of 2025. Dr. Stapleton.
I don't know if you're done with your presentation on
That
that,
was,
but
yeah, yes,
so
yes.
I thank you for a very transparent approach to sharing information about the RFP and for the Q&A session and the list of the attendees. I watched the Q&A, the video webinar. That was very nice. I'm worried about the aggressive schedule to review these proposals, come up with some agreement to have folks present if presentations are warranted. So I'm very hesitant about that December 19th date. But I also wondered, has the committee been formed? The selection committee been formed and
No.
created? Because that's like 3 weeks
No.
to get that done. So
Yes.
do want to make sure we have good representation on that selection committee.
Yes, no, that is the next thing. So absolutely. In terms of the timeline, I agree. It is ambitious. We're trying to so it may or may not be possible. And in terms of the award date is something that obviously is also subject to the process, and so it may not be doable, and we'll just have to see.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Britt, I'm going to jump into. Yeah, I think that you were going to have the questions and responses available today. I assume that's going to be delayed given. Was it the 24th?
Technically, it's tomorrow, I think, was
tomorrow.
the deadline for posting all. Yeah, and so what we're planning to do is provide answers to those that we can provide tomorrow, and then take another week. So provide the rest of the answers by November 1st. We're going to answer as much as we can tomorrow, but there are some that we just need a little more time. And so part of the posting tomorrow will be extending the timeline for answering the questions to November 1st.
Thanks.
Dr. Kerwin?
Yes. Two questions. The first is, what is the, from whom will the evaluation committee be selected? What's the population from which the evaluation committee will be selected? Is it internal staff? Is it outside people? I mean, how will you form the evaluation committee?
So that is, we've been thinking about that. And in addition to internal staff, we're also reaching out to some of our state partners to hopefully have some representation from outside of the AIB staff.
I think it is important that you have outside representation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
Secondly, this audit evaluation, I'm sorry, was written into the blueprint law.
Yes.
Right? And the blueprint law assumed that the blueprint was going to start on the implementation was going to start on a certain date, which it did not.
Correct, which is in part why the evaluation timeline was pushed out.
Okay, so it's going to be very important for them as they think about this evaluation to have the dates and the start times very clearly in their mind, so that we're really being evaluated on the work that has been done, not the work that would have been done had we gotten started on time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really important consideration.
Right.
And as part of, so the way the RFP is set up, once whoever is selected, the first order of business is to co-develop the evaluation plan and those what will be part of the evaluation and the sort of the sequence of the evaluation. And that's going to be in addition to, what they put in the proposal and interviews with potential contractors. I think that'll be a really important time to sort of make sure that whoever's selected sort of has all that context around blueprint, the timeline and what's happened when, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time? Obviously, we're going to be talking about this a lot more. Okay. The next item, I think, is outreach and communications. And so we wanted to share an update with you on outreach and communications. And now that our outreach and communications director, has been on board for a couple of months, we wanted to share sort of what we've been thinking about and doing around outreach and communications. So Arshia Sethi Snowden, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to just share some high-level goals and strategies for our outreach and communications plan at the AIB. So as Rachel mentioned, as I've been settling into my role, I've been working on kind of understanding the landscape and priorities in order to define our outreach and communications plan. So starting with our high-level goals, we are really trying to focus on grounding the materials we make, the content we put out, and the partnerships that we're strengthening on these goals. So the first one being to provide the public with reliable information about the blueprint through comprehensive educational materials focused on its purpose, goals, and implementation. So we want to increase the awareness of what the blueprint is, as well as educate people on where we are on implementation throughout the state. We also want to partner with and engage community members to gather input on AIB communication efforts and tools. So this spans a lot of different things, our website, our public materials, different events we may host. We've already been working in partnership with some of other groups who are such as the Blueprint Coalition and strategic facilitators to gather input as to what different audiences need, what they're hearing people talk about when it comes to blueprint and implementation. And we're really trying to ensure that we are gathering input from all different audiences and groups. Another part of this is that we also understand that different audiences need different things, and some already have a really good understanding of the blueprint. Some are more so in that awareness stage. So understanding a lot about how to reach our audiences and what information they most need in this moment. And then our third goal is to share success stories and best practices regarding blueprint implementation across Maryland. I think in all of our meetings, it comes up those different strengths and the innovative and transformative work that is happening across the different LEAs. And we want to make sure that we are sharing those success stories as well as best practices to encourage collaboration across stakeholders and LEAs. So these three different goals all are focused on the overall goal, which is to broaden awareness and understanding of the blueprint, as well as what is happening as a result of implementation already. Emma, yes.
Yes. In the third bullet, you say share the success stories. By what? How do you plan? How are you thinking about sharing them? What are the mediums by which you would be sharing these success stories?
That is a great question, which actually brings us right into the next slide with our strategy. So Emma, if you don't mind to go there,
Sure.
I can actually start with that. So we plan to share them in a lot of different ways because we understand that different audiences may take in information differently. So what we plan to do, and this is kind of going into the implementation highlights by pillar, what we plan to do is gather all of this information as to what the successes are, what's happening by the different pillars, and then disseminate that information differently depending on the different groups. So for example, pre-session, we're hoping to get this information to legislators in a way that is split up by district so that they're able to focus on the districts that they focus on. We're also hoping to make some one-pagers that can easily inform what the progress has been quantitatively as well as by pillar. And then we're also hoping to use different types of media. So to make short little video vignettes that we can hopefully get out to schools, get out to different places, create little videos and share those through social media on our website. So it's gonna, we're gonna create a lot of different content, not limited to, but including videos, one-pagers, and more visualizations as well when it comes to that quantitative data.
Right. So what about the established media like newspapers and et cetera?
Yeah.
You know, I hear one thing that happens is if people are unhappy about something with the blueprint, they'll write an op-ed. And so we get negative stories in the media. I hear all the time from people positive things about how the successes that they're having, the potential for the blueprint, et cetera. Such people tend not to write op-eds. They might mention it to you, but they don't. So will this strategy include testimonials to the blueprint where they're, legitimate, where people really have a story to tell about the success of and getting those and having this done by a third party, I think has greater impact than if we generate it. So where we can legitimately find these positive testimonials, getting them into the media, I think would have some real value.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback, and that's definitely something we're thinking about. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Okay. And then just tying back to some of the other strategies of how we're going to reach these goals. So these are just some of the strategies. Like Vice Chair Kerwin mentioned, there's a lot out there that we can do, and definitely open to feedback and input on these. So last week we sent out our fall educational materials to our LEA superintendents, MSD, and blueprint coordinators. They are also on our website for the public to access. You can find that in the agenda as well as on our resources page. And there is a slide deck and a one-pager. The goal of these materials was to paint a vision of the blueprint for educators, students, and community members, and also highlight what to watch for specifically this school year in implementation. So that is just one piece that we've put out already. Another big piece that we are working on is making our website more accessible and usable through our AIB website redesign. So we are working on this, and we are aiming to have our website as a resource for lots of people. We want to make sure it clearly describes the blueprint so we can help with increasing awareness of the blueprint, and have our website be a landing page for lots of different information as well as education on the blueprint. Our website also, as it stands currently, has a lot of content on there in terms of all of the implementation plans, all of the reports, and we want to make sure that this is easily accessible for people to reach. We did unfortunately have to make a change with our website contractor, but we are still hoping for an updated website in the spring. we're also working with the Do It Web Services team to do kind of a mapping of our website, as well as make some short-term fixes. And we'll also be looking in the next few months for partner and public input on ways that we can improve our website to make it more navigable, as well as accessible and useful for people. And then AIB updates. We are hoping to launch an email that will go out, and the versions can also live on our website as well, with updates from these public meetings, as well as partner updates and what to watch for in the next 4 to 6 weeks as well. So we have not started this yet, but we hope to launch in the next couple of months. This, we're hoping, is a good way of keeping our partners and community members informed as to what happens in these meetings and what we're also working towards, and to also showcase what to watch for in the future. And then, as I touched on a little bit, so the Blueprint Progress one-pager is going to highlight our quantitative data in terms of Blueprint implementation so far. We're also hoping to have this ready before session. And then I touched on the implementation highlights, but those are going to go hand in hand and be a lot of different types of media that we're able to put out depending on our audiences and can be used for different groups. And then lastly, we do want to get all of our board members out to schools and conduct visits specifically focused on Blueprint implementation, so you all are able to see Blueprint in action and really focus on the innovative work happening in our schools and our LEAs. So we are also thinking about different types of events to engage various audiences and working on that as well. The timelines I've mentioned are subject to change just because this is the first time we're doing a lot of these things, but we'll be aiming for these timelines, and definitely open to any feedback or questions now.
And if I can just add on related to both the website and the Blueprint Progress and implementation highlights, we are also working on a first set of interactive data dashboards that that we can post on a new website page that will really be focused on sort of the implementation to date, and allow folks to drill down statewide and then by county. And so we are working on that, and we've also been ongoing conversations with MSDE around how do we don't want to, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to sort of make sure that, we know that we have a lot of measures that we want to develop dashboards for, and we have our aligned metrics that the two boards have agreed on, and sort of what do those metrics look like, and potential dashboards versus more interactive dashboards. And so that is another piece of the work that sort of is related to both the website and, outreach and communications more broadly.
Yes,
Dr. Mako, excuse me.
Sure. I don't, I would like to hear a little bit about what your thinking is around, like one of the things I appreciate the most about the AIB website as it currently stands is it is fully transparent, right? I mean, like every meeting, even a meeting that's canceled, it's noted on there, right? And all of the documents are there. And I think someone who really wanted to dig deep and find out the history of the blueprint and what has gone on, week to week and day to day, all of the documentation is there and open and available. And I think that transparency really, has been a strength of the board and what we're trying to do. And at the same time, when you are fully transparent, it leads to massive clutter, right? Because there is, gobs and gobs of documents.
Yep.
So I would like to hear a little bit about like how you have, how in the new website redesign you are hoping to navigate that, this like kind of delicate balance between like providing ample access to information and resources, but also like having it curated to a point where people just don't get lost in all of the documents that are available.
Yeah, that is a great point, and we definitely don't want to take away any of that transparency. I think a lot of it has to do with the organization of our website right now. So for example, there's not like a drop down under any of the menu items. You don't know what's under any of the menu items right now until you click on it. So that's a big part. I think also when it comes to our implementation plans and organizing those, now that we have multiple years of those, we can have a past, like in 2023 implementation plans folder and then a current one, so that it's way easier to find what you're looking for. And then just another example, and I know these are smaller smaller ones, but speak to the overall goal of just making it easier to find information on our website. We also want to split out our resources tab, so we have a separate reports tab. So these are smaller examples, but I think to your point, we're just trying to make it more clean in how you get to a certain page and also more intuitive. So you can look at the drop down and say, oh, here are reports by LEA, and click right on that. And then you get 2023 and then current ones. Rachel, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that's like the vision as to where we're going.
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, I think we don't want to take away any transparency, but we actually want to maybe make it more transparent by making it easier to find what you're looking for, and to sort of sort through things. I mean, it's all there, but finding it is, I think, challenging even for those of us who know where to look sometimes. So we take that feedback very seriously. And I think also, and as we've been thinking about the website redesign and how it connects up with the information, we have a lot of incoming information that we're trying to organize, and connecting that up connecting up our document organization with the website posting so that it can be more seamless and more efficient, I would also be very, very helpful.
Okay, there any other question about the website that we need to get addressed here? Okay. All right.
That was the last item in my update. Mr. Chair, I wasn't sure if you might want to say anything about the Blueprint leadership training that started yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Okay.
We had what I would call an organizational meeting yesterday, reference to the Blueprint training, which is required by statute. It is required in order to ensure that we have some level of conformity, some level of understanding and efficiency in terms of how the blueprint is to be implemented, and to make certain that all of us are on the same page. We have a number of participants, I think about 50 yesterday, involved in the initial process of this. We're trying to ensure that the time that we utilize in terms of the training calls for a year of training for a number of people engaged in the implementation of the blueprint. But we're not starting at the very beginning of this, because many of the people that are engaged in the meetings and the after discussions that we've had with superintendents, principals to some degree, to LEAs and others, we've had a number of interactive meetings over the last year or so. So in that we are more than 2 years into the actual implementation, I'm not sure that it is required for us to have as much detail for all of the people engaged in this process. And so yesterday's meeting was designed to, in effect, tailor the time, the subject matters to be covered, and also who would be included in the ongoing discussions. I thought it was very helpful We will follow up with that and outline a process for going forward. Hopefully, we will not have to spend an entire year for everyone engaged, but a more limited time frame for those who probably have not been as engaged from the beginning. Again, it was designed to, in effect, get feedback, determine the subject matters, the time, how it would be delivered, whether or not it would be virtual, whether or not some of it would be in person, whether or not there would be all-site meetings, but to cover all segments of the state to ensure that people have the adequate training necessary for us to go forward. So it was a very productive meeting, but there's a great deal of follow-up that has to be must be made in the foreseeable future.
Mr. Chair, if I could just maybe provide a little context. As a reminder for everyone, the blueprint law did require leadership training, and the statute lays out very specific items to be included in the training around different aspects of the blueprint. And that originally training was, as the chair kind of referred to, that under the blueprint, that training was to occur, several years ago. This is training that MSDE is responsible for in consultation with AIB. And earlier this summer, MSDE did a competitive process to select a vendor to provide the training. And this training is under the blueprint law, which was actually amended this past session. Each superintendent is required to participate in it, as well as the chair and vice chair of each Board of Education, the AIB, and the State Board of Education, as well as, of course, the state superintendent. Those are the required participants. And in addition, the statute envisioned including school leaders, principals, and other schools staff in the training. The training is not intended to be able to reach every single principal in the state in this first 1 year, first kind of training model. But a train the trainer kind of model is part of the framework of the training program. And so earlier this week, we did have that first meeting to bring the superintendents and the board chairs and vice chairs together to sort of review a potential framework for the topics and the sessions, and then really get input on what would be most valuable for the superintendents and board members in terms of the training, and also what, as the chair said, sort of what the mode is, how much in person, how much virtual, and also how to group them into sort of whether to use a cohort model or group, have smaller groups of districts and principals sort of meeting together, either virtually or in person. So it's all kind of on the table for consideration as this training is sort of refined and rolled out over the next year. So hopefully that helps. Dr. Kerwin?
Yeah, I'm just going to, since I was in the session, and I didn't know really what to expect. And I could imagine you got a whole bunch of busy superintendents, and they're being brought together about a series of meetings on training. It's probably, you could imagine maybe this wasn't the highest item on their priority list of what to do. But I would have to say that I thought there was a remarkable, we broke into little smaller groups, and there was a lot of goodwill. People were engaged and wanted to make this successful. So I ended the session really quite hopeful by what could accomplish here, and it was not seen as sort of an add-on nuisance that at least that was my take from the people that I interacted with.
Can I just ask?
Dr. Stapleton?
Yeah, Rachel, that was helpful context because I felt like I was like 3 steps back. And I just want to summarize what I think I heard from you. There's a legislative requirement that training be done for, at a minimum, the superintendents and the vice chair and chair of various organizations that are part of it. But the meeting yesterday was about planning for the training and had all of the trainees in the room to discuss what the training should be. Would that be accurate?
There was a draft model that we were to provide commentary on. They made suggestions about how they thought this training could roll out, and then we broke into small groups to discuss the proposal and give them feedback. Based on that feedback, they're going to come back, I think, with the training model.
Okay. And who's the vendor?
K-12 Coalition.
Oh, thanks.
One of the reasons as to why we needed that was because many of the people in the room have already had informal training already. We've had ongoing discussions with virtually all of the superintendents, and they're looking at this and probably saying, well, why should I have to go to a year's training on something that I've been engaged with for the last year and a half? So you wanted to extract and figure out what would be meaningful for those, as well as some of the people who will be getting this for the first time. So that was the challenge we had in trying to tailor this with them in the room. So I think that it ended very well, and we have at least a potential roadmap for how we may go forward. And we'll look at that and move forward, hopefully. But a 4 years training, the number of hours that they had originally suggested for this, given the audience of some of the people, in my opinion, is not required. Any other questions?
Dr. Lynch? Yep, Dr. Lynch?
Yeah, so I just, so it's in statute that, so I just want clarification. So it's in statute that the AIB board leadership, the MSDE board leadership, and then superintendents and select principals need to have some level of training.
And the local board of education.
And the local boards. Is there requirements of what they need to be trained on in terms of, like, is that written in statute as to what the training needs to be, or is it general, like, blueprint?
No, it has there are specific topics, and I'm happy to share. We can share the summary of the statute with you. But, it's sort of like practices in top performing systems that are, around the world and sort of what they do, instructional strategies to improve equitable outcomes for students, leadership in terms of like how to sort of engage in transformational change and how to lead transformational change, things like that. But we can give you there are very specific topics that need to be covered. How they're covered and how, is broader, but it does have very specific information in the statute that I see is actually being put in the chat.
I guess my sort of technical question is, if the AIB generally oversees all of this, or MSDE oversees their training programs, like everybody sort of has this own oversight. If everybody is required to be in these training sessions, what is the oversight mechanism to ensure that the training is being provided with fidelity, or that the training is what has been expected? You know what I'm saying? It's sort of an interesting model. is it something that's reported then to the legislature? What happens to determine, is there outcome measures of what has to be provided as part of this training?
I don't think there is.
Okay.
And when you look at all of the things that are outlined, they are pretty flexible and broad enough that you can include just about everything in there. But it's required by statute. It requires a year. I don't think it requires everyone to be in full detail for a full year. I think that you can tailor it in such a way that could meet the requirements of the statute, but also be meaningful for the people who are participating. Having people participate in certain level of details that were initially presented to us, I think it would turn so many people off that you're simply going through a process of not getting very meaningful results from it. So you have to step back and say, okay, we're a year and a half into this. What would be meaningful? How can we conform to the statute? How can we provide a level of information to them that would be meaningful and that they will meaningfully participate? That's where we are at this point in time. Had we started initially at the very beginning, I think you may have tailored it in a different way. But at this point in time, most of these superintendents have a good deal of information of people they've contacted and met with the board and many members of the board. We have had many sessions with them in their retreats, their various meetings, and we've gone through a great deal of what is included in the blueprint already. So this is a way of trying to meet both of those requirements. What it is that you want to provide, is it meaningful, is the time useful, and are we meeting the basic requirements of the statute?
And I would just add that there is a, K-12 coalition. I mean, ultimately, we need to see where we land on what the training looks like. But part of their proposal did include sort of like goals for each component and then an evaluation piece of that to, determine if the training, met the goals and feedback after each session. So there is a process built into the sessions. Training is probably not a good word for this, so we probably should work on that. Obviously we're going to make sure to keep the legislature apprised of, what the training looks like. All of the materials will be available, agendas and that kind of thing. So there will be an ability to see what the training looked like. Absolutely. Also, because it's sort of a train the trainer model is the goal. So, because we do potentially want to replicate this for, future superintendents, future board members and principals across the state.
There is no requirement that the participant have to take a test at the end of this process.
No,
we're testing you, sir.
Dr. Stapleton,
Can I make a plug? I don't know if our fabulous new director of communications is involved in this, but given that part of our selling the story of the blueprint is to, it seems like these are aligning quite nicely. So it would be great if she could either participate in the training or help guide the training as well. That would be great.
We'll take that back. Definitely. I think I will second Dr. Kerwin's comment that I do think there was a lot of feeling that, even though the timing of the original training is off and it wasn't done then, and it might have been very helpful then, that this is actually a good opportunity to really connect the work that's been done, and that is, what we're trying to accomplish with the strategic plans that they're developing, and many of them, and that it's just it's a good time to have an impact on the work. So hopefully that will, we can build on that.
Yeah. I hope that the initial meeting proves to be a good step off for what we will experience going forward. But I will reserve my assessment about this once we get into the fourth or fifth iteration of this in a 7-step plan, because you deal with attendance, you deal with participation, and an awful lot of things. And I've seen a lot of meetings start off very well, but when you get to a year-long process and you get somewhere halfway between, you look at how well people are participating and what is the engagement like at that point. So hopefully we will have a full engagement and quite a deal of participation going down the line. Okay, anything else, Madam Executive Director?
No, that is it
Okay.
for today.
All right, I have no closing comments other than to thank everyone for all of their work, that involved in getting us to this point. We will meet again on November the 21st. Hopefully we will have some additional LEAs to have an appropriate vote on at that meeting. We've indicated the time frame for when all of that is to be submitted. Again, I want to thank Garrett and was it St. Mary's County for their participation and being able to meet the original time frame that we've outlined. Okay, I now will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and properly second that we adjourn. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, hearing no opposition, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Did I lose the chair?